Old Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras se porte l'épée, il se porte la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Madam Clerk, are there any addendum items this evening?
No, there are no addendum items this evening.
At this time, I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Any disclosures of interest tonight? Yes, Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Item number 14 in committee items as well as council items, and it's an indirect pecuniary interest. Reason for the interest is it's personal in nature.
Item 14.
Item 14.
Thank you. Other than Alderman Doucette's disclosure, it should be noted that there are no other conflicts of interest. I'd entertain a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 13-18 held on June 11th, 2018. Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor? David?
Item number 3, please.
Anything else, David? Councillor Doucette? Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 13, please.
Any other items?
14 for the conflict. Yeah. I'll pull item 14 for the conflict. Sorry.
Thank you. Any others? Then at this point, I'd like to call for approval of those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Bodner. Seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We have no presentations this evening. We have 3 delegations for 10-minute maximum. The first delegation is David Hayworth. He's official plan policy consultant with Planning and Development Services, Niagara Region. It's regarding our new official plan, new regional official plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be here before the Mayor, Council, and senior staff and the public today to talk about the new official plan that the region is starting to undertake now. Why a new official plan? Originally, the role of the region back in the early 70s was focused on preserving agricultural lands and an urban boundary line. And since then, the complexity of the provincial planning framework has grown, and the region's role and mandate has grown in planning as we provide provincial review functions. So the platform was somewhat outdated, and we've been amending that platform with amendments to comply with provincial policies over time, but now we're at the point where the planning systems got quite comprehensive and complex. So we want to do an entire new official plan with a fresh look and make it as comprehensive as possible, as easily understood as possible, which has also been an issue in the past. So the council in late 2016 allocated resources to create the new official plan. And we're going to actually have a special meeting at council July 5th to hear how the public envisions Niagara growing and developing. Basically, we're informing that we're doing a new official plan, and the people can talk about, hey, you shouldn't do that, or you should do that, and these are changes we'd like. It's early in the process. It's a requirement to fulfill an act, but we're going to have significant public input, as you'll see as we go through the process. In the meantime, we've been discussing with area planners and developing frameworks for required priority background studies that will inform the official plan. Our preliminary objectives are to promote and achieve great development outcomes that contribute to complete community solutions and a quality urban experience, facilitate opportunities for economic growth, protect regional, natural, and agricultural resources, and adequately respond to the challenges of climate change, provide clear policy direction where necessary and discretion where appropriate, address provincial requirements, regional mandate matters, and provide guidance to local area municipalities. And a new official plan will be developed under Section 26 of the Planning Act. So you probably heard in the past about municipal comprehensive review and being related to growth management. Now the Municipal Comprehensive Review, under the new planning framework of the growth plan, is the entire official plan. So it encompasses the growth management work that was started in the past, but it also envelopes in natural heritage, agriculture, transportation, servicing, etc. So we're starting on key priority background studies, as I mentioned. At each stage, when we compile background material, there'll be an opportunity for public input. We'll develop options. There'll be an opportunity for input, stakeholder, public, etc. We'll have key recommendations, and then we'll have input at the recommendations, which will then inform policy, and we'll develop policy, which will then, again, go through a process. So this slide shows the priority background studies by topic. And we've put those in puzzle pieces because of the interrelationship of all the different sections of the official plan. So under growth management, we have land budget, or that's the land needs assessment, employment land strategy, urban structure, and housing strategy. So the land needs assessment is going to determine the amount of developable urban land needed for residential and employment purposes to 2041. It's going to identify excess lands, which are lands that would not develop until post-2041. We're looking at an alternative green target to the required 80 people and jobs per hectare, which can be requested to the province for greenfield lands. And there's an opportunity under the growth plan to rationalize urban boundaries and ensure that sufficient lands are in the proper location to accommodate growth. Urban boundary expansions, if there are excess lands, once we do the land needs assessment, we'll determine, do we need more land? Do we just have enough? Or are we in an excess supply? And most likely it will be an excess supply once we go through the calculations. And urban boundaries can only take place if there are, provided there's a de-designation of lands within the region. For employment land strategy, we want to ensure sufficient and marketable supply for traditional industrial employment, identify regional employment areas. Under the growth plan, we have to identify regionally employment areas that we want to protect for the long term, meaning you can't convert them to another use until they go through a comprehensive review by the region in an amendment. The region is currently working with the local municipalities, specifically area planners at this stage, and this project will also be informed by the region's annual employment inventory. Urban structure. Urban structure is another key component that will inform the land needs assessment. And what we want to do is take advantage of the 60% intensification rate in the growth plan and apply it to certain areas within the region, key nodes of intensification. That's an opportunity to help protect established neighborhoods as well by directing growth to where it should be. Take advantage of public transit, public works, and community infrastructure and services. And we want to assign population and density accordingly. So this is somewhat of a draft urban structure we've started to talk to area planners about. The province has identified downtown St. Catharines as an urban growth center. We've got downtown Niagara Falls and Welland as emerging urban centers. This is all preliminary and draft. Major GO transit station areas, you've heard we've been doing secondary plans for Grimsby, Niagara Falls, St. Catharines GO stations, as well as Lincoln, for intensification around the GO station area for the future. Other regional growth areas, those, an example of that would be the Brock District Plan that we've done, where you have all the institutional employment uses there to do a plan that takes advantage of that and allows for intensification around that. We're just starting to initiate one for Glendale now. Regional corridors, these are corridors that connect various urban centers throughout, and there's an opportunity for intensification along regional corridors where there's public transit and there's been community infrastructure investment, et cetera, and we can help establish targets there. And then there's your opportunity through your own plans for local centers and local corridors. Housing strategy, we want to promote an appropriate range and mix of housing forms, promote choice, aging in place opportunities and affordability, set affordable ownership and rental housing targets, identify tools to support affordable housing, align with the homelessness and action plan of the region, and support complete communities. So that concludes the growth management component, which are the key studies. Under the Rural and Natural Systems Management Program, we have agriculture, natural environment, aggregate resources, and climate change. This is our agricultural framework. We recognize agriculture as a key component of the regional economy. We want to protect the unique land, update specific policies such as agriculture-related and on-farm diversified uses. Through area planners in developing the frameworks, some points that were raised were viability of certain agricultural lands, refinement to provinces' agricultural system mapping, how wineries are addressed in the escarpment plan and provinces' permitted use guidelines, importance of agricultural impact assessments, which is a new requirement under the growth plan, importance of compatibility between regional natural heritage system and agricultural systems, and concern about use of greenhouses for cannabis. So these are all elements that we're aware of now that we will address through the agricultural background study. Natural environment and water systems planning. This is a significant component of the plan because it helps determine where growth can occur outside of those areas traditionally, or at least after they've been assessed in further detail. It is recognized that accurate mapping and appropriate methods to interpret and update mapping is critical. We want to establish and identify features for provincial compliance, develop watershed planning policy framework, specific topics for consideration, offsetting, shorelines, watercourse mapping. These are all issues that have been raised to us that we'll have to take a look at and analyze to an extent. Education is a priority component of the engagement process here. So the mapping and the watershed planning part were raised through area planners as very important elements that should be addressed early in the process. So as part of the development of the background study, we're going to have discussion papers developed on those two elements, mapping accuracy, etc., and watershed planning. Aggregate resources, very important to the region. Extraction of the resource is necessary and need to address land use compatibility. We started agricultural background report back when it was Imagine Niagara, and we were planning for growth to 2031. The new provincial planning documents came out. That background report was completed, so we did an addendum to make sure it complied with the new provincial policy that came out. That was completed, and now we're going at the stage where we'll start to develop policies for aggregate resources. Climate change. This slide basically shows all the different elements that impact climate change, and all those elements are in the growth plan, and much of what the growth plan is about addressing climate change to a certain extent. So you can see all those factors, and those are all factors we'll have to analyze through the completion of a background report. Engagement process considerations. We're reaching out to the Indigenous people early in the process, carry forward essential information and direction, a clear understanding that one policy decision impacts another, opportunities for council members to feel involved, consideration and identification of the regional mandate, determining what is our really core mandate through the form as we develop the background studies, recommendations, and policies. Broad-based and personal consultation, and provide strategic facilitation through the process where necessary. Moving forward, we're obviously complying with Planning Act requirements and going beyond that, providing for broad consultation and development of the background studies and official plan policies. We want to present to local councils. I'll be coming back to you periodically to update you on the approach and invite involvement. We got a lot of good public comments under Imagine Niagara, which isn't that old and still is relevant, so we'll be using that as well in terms of theming and providing input into the process. And we're going to complete the regional official plan in sections for endorsement, then consolidate it for final adoption to send off to the province for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you,
If there's
Mr.
any
Haywood.
questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Members of council, any questions? Mr. Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We just finished our official plan here in Port Colborne and spent quite a bit of money and time and so on. Will this compete with that, or will we have to change some of our, I know that they've also, Dan has also sent it out to the region for approval and you guys have approved it, so
Right.
I'm just wondering about the competition and when you make changes, are we going to have to make some changes to ours because of what you've done? And then who pays for that? That's the big question.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good question. You will probably have to update your official plan, and the degree I would have to go through a detailed analysis in looking at your plan versus what we finally develop to determine to what degree that would be. But we recognize that, and actually under the provincial setup, there's not a long time for municipalities to comply, but once we're done. So part of what we would like to do is develop some guidelines or something along those lines to help municipalities follow that to make it easier to achieve compliance within the framework that we recognize every municipality has its own official plan, uniqueness and nuances and local issues they have to address. We don't want to take that away, but we feel that by helping developing some guidelines towards the end of the process, it will help you when you have to update your plans.
Mr. Doucette.
Just a follow-up to that. So essentially what you're saying is that the regional official plan will be the one that all the communities will have to follow, and they will set up addendums within your official plan for every city? Is that how, so we will not have to worry about an official plan anymore?
No, I'm not saying that.
Well, that's sort of what I'm
develop,
reading between the lines here.
No, we would develop guidelines that would help you in terms of updating your own official plan. Well, they wouldn't be actually part of our official plan per se.
Mr. Doucette. Madam Butters and Madam Bemery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about this last part when you say it's to complete the official plan in sections for endorsement and then consolidate those endorsed sections. So do those sections relate to the areas that you just went through? Is that how the sections will be?
Yes, but there will be other sections. You know, there'll be servicing sections, okay, transportation. The ones that I talked about today are really key priority ones we have to get going on because okay, we need to get the background material, the options and recommendations to inform the policy development. We've done a lot of work already on how we go, how we flow for the transportation and servicing sections. There won't be that much required in updating those sections because significant work had already taken place. Mm-hmm. So there will be servicing, there will be cultural heritage sections, etc. But these are the key priority ones we really have to get moving on.
Okay, and so then when they're have some connectedness, like how does that work in the sections being endorsed when they're connected to other pieces?
Right, so you endorse a section, it's endorsed on a preliminary basis, knowing that it's going to be brought forward in a compilation and that there could be some adjustments to
so
make
there
it
is
fit.
still wiggle room.
But we have to bring the whole thing forward fresh one time is too large.
Right.
Right, so we want to get endorsement, and we're always considering, we know kind of what's going on with the other sections, so we're considering that as we bring each section forward. But that's the best way we thought of in terms of getting buy-in and being able to park that section for a while so you can work on another section.
And if I could ask one more question, you'd said earlier on that before it was more about protecting agricultural lands and stuff in that nature. So would you say that in this new one, there'll still be the same kind of protection for agricultural lands as there has been in the past?
I would say from a high level, yes, and we're required to under provincial policy. There's some nuances we can look at which were some of the topics we raised on this slide.
Councilor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. I didn't quite understand all of what you were saying to Councilor Doucette. The question was raised as to who was going to pay for any changes that we needed to make to our official plan as a result of the official plan that you make at the region. I mean, it's coming out of the same taxpayers' dollars. So could you explain who is going to pay for what so that we can assure our taxpayers?
At this point, I wouldn't be able to speak to that. I have a budget, and my mandate is to complete our plan. My budget and mandate isn't to complete local official plans. I know as part of our discussions in doing our plan, we're talking about developing guidelines to help the locals bring their plans into conformity. Beyond that, I would not be able to comment.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through to Mr. Hayworth. Just a couple of things that I picked up on as just going through. Under the land needs assessment, where it says alternative greenfield density targets to the required 80 people and jobs per hectare can be requested to the province. Is there a different number that we're envisioning for Niagara as opposed to the 80 that's
what we want to
required?
do is look at that because we feel that's a high target for Niagara in general, especially when you look at greenfield lands that reach out to the edge of the urban boundary and interface with agricultural lands. That can create greater land use conflicts, and you want some what they call edge planning. So lowering densities in those areas is probably a good idea if you want to avoid some conflicts. But we have to put some numbers in. We have to develop the criteria. The province has to sign off on that. And that is a key input. So two of the first inputs into the land needs assessment, one is the greenfield density targets. If you're going to go with 80 people and jobs per hectare, you're going to have an alternative target. So we have to start addressing that and looking at that now. It's too early on in the process to give you a number. And the other one is the urban structure, which I talked about.
Okay. And right below that, one of the other issues, you touched on that, urban area boundary expansions can take place even if there are excess lands, provided there is a de-designation of land. So are we talking about a flip from agricultural in some areas to taking urban designation and putting it into agriculture? Is that what you're talking about?
The plan, the growth plan, allows a scenario like that to occur. It has to happen after you've done your land needs assessment. The expansions have to be supported by significant background studies, and then once enveloped in, there has to be secondary plans to actually develop those areas. And what we're trying to do right now, we've just started the process of starting to develop with area planners criteria for how we look at expansions. What's the criteria that we're going to use to determine that scenario?
Okay. Being from Niagara and listening to farmers years ago, where there was concern that their agricultural land wasn't worthy of agricultural designations anymore. I can understand if that still holds true now, why you might want to take a look at flipping those.
Yeah, it's actually more than that. Like, in a sense, there's the aspect that, you know, is one municipality not have sufficient lands to grow to 2041? So they may want more land, but where does the de-designation happen within the region? The other is a municipality that maybe has sufficient lands, but they're not necessarily in the right place. So within that municipality, they may be able to look at expanding and then de-designating in that own municipality. So there has to be criteria developed, because where does that occur? What's the location of excess lands? What's the location of where de-designation should take place?
Okay, just two more things. Under urban structure, it says identify a hierarchy of settlement areas.
Yeah.
With regards to regionally or municipally?
Regionally, there's two elements to the urban structure. There's the hierarchy of settlement areas, which is regionally, and we're trying to determine from the province what that actually means. We've been waiting on guidance material, which has come out, but it doesn't really provide any guidance on that. That could be as simple as you have settlement areas, you have hamlets, you have rural areas, but we're not positive on that. Then the other one, which is more local, is which is what the second slide on urban structure showed, which is the kind of intensification nodes within municipalities, which was downtown St. Catharines, downtown Niagara Falls, and those station areas, etc. Yeah.
Okay, and last question, and I guess this goes to the conversation that's been had throughout Niagara with regards to climate change. And the issues in the climate change slide, and climate change is in the middle, and then it's, you know, complete communities, infrastructure, transportation, water, energy, natural hazards, natural environment, waste, operational greenhouse gas inventory targets. With Niagara being as vast as it is, a lot of these components will have to be taken into consideration when you look at how quickly the west part of Niagara is developing in Lincoln, West Lincoln, Grimsby, things like that. And how do we service all those areas, especially with transportation, infrastructure, and energy, I guess, when you take a look at that, also waste and things. How does that all play in together in an area as vast as Niagara is? Is that part of the planning process when you take an overview of how far do we have to go to move people and provide the rest of the infrastructure?
I think each of those components that are shown on the slide will be considered, and I think it depends on the magnitude to which we develop policy addressing each one of those items and how we do that. I can't answer that. We're starting the process. It's early. It's a good comment for consideration, and we'll take a look at that and think about that. But each of those components will have a set of policies, and they're broken down per topic, but then there's the overriding section of climate change that pulls that together. So what that will look like at the end of the day, I'm not sure. It's fairly new. It's new for a lot of municipalities or regions that are undertaking that kind of work. But that work has started in other regions, so we'll be looking at that as well.
Okay, great. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Bodner, then Mr. Doucette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to David. When you talk in here about aggregate resources, we're talking about something that is going to happen in the future and not dealing with what's on the ground now. Just because there'll be people watching this and wondering whether, you know, we've had our challenges with, you know, the quarry we have here over the years.
Right.
Are we simply looking at if somebody wants to expand?
What we have to do is we'll establish policies, one that recognize existing licensed operations out there. They're there, right? The other one is policies that allow their expansion. And aggregates are not allow it per se, but what you have to look at, what's required in order to expand, okay? They are a provincially significant resource, so they do have some policy status, and an actual, you have to have consideration for uses that come towards the quarry and how they're planned for, so we have to develop policies that look at that. And there's provincial policies on that we have to fit with, and then there's the opportunity through the whole process to say, okay, we're complying with provincial policy, but there's these local issues. Can we put some policies in to address those local issues and still comply with provincial policy?
One more also, because we've had challenges with the cannabis being grown in greenhouses. Are you looking to see whether that is going to be anyways, what are you looking at? It's mentioned in here, but is it just
we presented early on the agricultural background study framework, and it was a hot topic, I think probably in the press at the time. It was mentioned at Regional Planning Committee. They raised it, and they raised it with the issue of there's been some compatibility issues when they're established, etc. So they raised that as, we want you to be aware of that as you're doing your agricultural background study.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Aquilina, can I have your thoughts on what this is doing and something similar to what the questions I've asked? Is there going to be competing interests? Who loses out on the competing interests? Is it us? Is it them? Or do we really have control, or we don't have control? And I think that's important.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Doucette, as I've alluded to in the past, I have some concerns. It's still very preliminary in the process. I know Mr. Hayward mentioned about looking at urban growth expansion boundaries, and kind of there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. Let's call a spade a spade. That's going to be the case, but that has not yet been brought forward for council's consideration. It's very early in the process, so it's something that I would need to get more information on, and is through the study what the final conclusions are going to be, the recommendations, which then I'll have to report back to council. My concerns are... through Mr. Mayor, it's one of the things that I kind of foresaw years ago. Although no one was actually saying what the plan was, reading between the lines, it's something that council is going to have to consider in the future, near future.
Councilor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more question, kind of following up with Councillor Bodner's theme with the aggregate. Will rehabilitation of quarries be part of your process?
Through the mayor to the councillor, and I apologize if I forgot to mention that a couple times. Yeah, there will be policies about rehabilitation to the extent we'll have to see what comes out as we develop that, but there will be policies. There's also requirements under the licensing of the Aggregates Act, etc. So we have to look at that and blend that to a degree, but there will be policies about rehabilitation in general.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Hayward, you spoke about designation, de-designation. Is it conceivable to think of de-designation in a municipality and designation in the adjoining municipality of the same land in advance of perhaps an amalgamation?
I guess when you look at excess lands, there's a couple components. One, we have to identify excess lands post-2041, and they would have to have a certain maybe designation to recognize that they're not going to develop to after 2041. There's no de-designation required specifically. That's just like identifying them post-2041. They're not required to be de-designated unless there's an expansion. So if you have excess lands and there's an expansion in the region, there has to be more lands de-designated than what are being expanded onto. And that as to the logistics of how that will happen, we have to develop some criteria around. And that's what we're starting at this point to do right now.
Thank you. I would appear that we've exhausted our questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. And we, like I said, this is very early on in the process, and we will be coming back to local councils and updating them through the process. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, our next delegation, we have Don Gilbert, Manager of Operations, John Sander, Manager of Customer Engagement, and Christine Carmichael, Director of Corporate Services, all from Canadian Niagara Power. Could you come forward, or Mr.?
Just John and I will be coming.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council and senior members of the staff. We are thankful that you invited us up. We come with a little bit of our heads down a little bit because we're not performing the best that we could possibly be performing right now. There are a number of reasons why this is happening right now. I've got a quick little presentation to sort of show you where we stand. Real quickly, we're just going to have a quick overlook at what the system is all about, because you have three systems here we are intertied with. We are intertied with Hydro One, and you have two distribution systems here in Port Colborne. We're going to look quickly at our system reliability. I'd like to just sort of go over a bit of the history in terms of what we have been investing in Port Colborne over the last 15 years. We do have a number of system enhancements that we are looking to implement as soon as possible. It's going to take a bit of studying to get us to where we need to be, but we need to get those things going very fast. And also, be better communicators with the City of Port Colborne. We do have a number of enhancements that John's going to talk to you all about with respect to how we will be a better communicator to you, our stakeholder customers. As you can see, historically, the City of Port Colborne was fed transmission-wise, if you look at the number C1P on the left side of your screen, and C2P. This is Port Colborne substation, which is just on the other side of town. And we used to have two transmission lines that fed into Port Colborne. Hydro One took the one transmission line away from us based on the loading requirements. I believe at the time there was no discussion about that from them other than the loss of load being I think it's Vale that we work with up on the other side of town. And because they've reduced their load so much, that single radial fed transmission line is what we are being provided with for Port Colborne TS. And as you can see, we have four feeders, M11, M9, M10, and M12 that run out and feed all of the 27.6 distribution system here in Port Colborne. With that, that's the system basically. We've broken the system into those four areas. Colored wise, you can see the 10, the 11, the 9, and the 12. Mostly the rural system that you have up here showing around is where we're experiencing an awful lot of problems lately. However, the M11 has been giving us a great deal of problems as well. I think I put it. This is the other systems that we have in Port Colborne, which is our DS side of our business, which is the smaller 4 kV system, which is a little bit easier, a little more losses, but we use this as an under voltage system as well, and there is no movement to get it out of here. It's going to stay forever. Our reliability stats, we were tracking actually not terribly up to a couple of years ago. We were in the ballpark of where we needed to be. In 2016 and 17, we really hit some bad time. And I will show you the reasons why in a second here, but as you can see, it wasn't real bad, but the last couple of years, and actually this year, we're tracking at an alarming rate for us as well, that it's going to not be the greatest year until we can get these things remedied, and we have a good plan for that. When you look at why, and everybody will ask, why is the power out all the time? And these are, we track every stat and every reason and every cause code that we have, and we know why the power is going out. If you look at this one over the last couple of years called loss of supply, that's the Hydro One feed. We've lost that Hydro One feed countless times, and I can give you a report on what that means, but at the end of the day, I'm not just going to be up here to point my finger at Hydro One and say that they're the only reason why. We did invite Hydro One to come up to attend with us tonight. They chose not to be a part of the discussion. Not sure why, but I would imagine politics had something to do with it at this point of the game. We are seeing a number of other areas. The emerald ash borer has been treacherous to us. We're losing ash trees at a phenomenal rate. And it's not just the fact that the ash tree that we trim or maintain are being the problems that you're experiencing. An ash tree can fall from pretty much, you know, if it's a 70-foot ash, it can impact us. We only manage sort of the floor to ceiling within the vicinities of proximity to our work, which is really a 10-foot clearing area. We usually only clear about 16 feet, and if we go beyond that, we usually get grief for that as well. So we try to take as much as we can, but these ash trees are just being beat up so bad that they're blowing from every direction now, and they're getting inside of our areas of concern as well, and our limits of proximity. We are having an alarmingly high again, adverse weather conditions. I think that the gentleman talked about global warming. We are getting storms now and sustained winds like we have never seen before, at least in the last 3 years. And the reality is that our system, as robust as it is, you know, we still have 100,000 connections as a part of your system up here in Port Colborne. And that constant beating and beating and beating is taking its toll on that system, as well as a number of other areas with respect to equipment failure. Before, and this is not it's not a reflection of what happened in the past, it's just to demonstrate that we are spending or maintaining the spend on the Port Colborne distribution system quite an accelerated approach. We're about $1.8 million a year annually without substations involved in that number as well, and a substation is usually about $1.5 million to build. Since 2004, you have to understand, I guess, when a company is taken over by another distribution organization, their first problem or priority is to understand where the issues are. To be able to come in and manage the assets effectively, you have to really understand where your issues are. Your backbone of your systems are your substations. We've identified that, and by 2019, we will have changed 5 of the substations. They will all be changed here in Port Colborne. And that is I'm not saying that's our foundation, but that's where we want to make sure that we spend our money right off the get-go to make sure that those things are performing adequately for us. With respect to other investment areas in Port Colborne, we've rebuilt Kalali South, we've rebuilt Royal, we've rebuilt Elm, Barrack, Sugarloaf, Maine. We've worked on all of these streets, and we're trying to get the biggest bang for our buck. Usually what we do is we build the substation, which is our platform, then we go to our distribution feeders and try to rebuild those, and then we build off on the tributary lines that's the way that you manage a system when you're dealing with hydro. And not on a limited budget, but it's the budget and the plan that we've come up with. So what are we going to do? I did mention Hydro One, and Hydro One has not been as cooperative with us as they probably could have. Not for lack of us being in their face all the time. I want you to know that. We've struggled with the electromechanical relays at Port Colborne TS for years now. No matter what we do in terms of auto system improvements, like if we're looking at auto reclosing devices, if they don't align with the legacy relays, and I know that probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but if it doesn't line up with what our service provider, our source provider is giving us, they're not going to act effectively either. So right now, we just, again, invested in new relaying at Port Colborne TS so that our auto equipment, distribution automation, will work a lot more effectively for all of our equipment out there. We're actually investing right now in automated switching placements where we used to have to drive to that site and manually close those switches. We've identified areas we know we're going to increase our performance time in sectionalizing and picking switches and picking pieces of power back up by installing automated switching. We've just invested another $50,000 in the last month and a half on fault indicating equipment, which allows us to better pinpoint where the issues are. We've put them into play in a number of areas already, but we still have about 20 more locations. We want to put in the most ideal location for that type of equipment. And we've also just procured the services of S&C Lavalin to do an updated protection and control review of all of the Port Colborne systems, so that making sure all of our automation, all of the things that I've mentioned, where we strategically place fault indicating devices, switching, where those Vipers reclosers are going to perform the best for us, are going to be available to us, or going to be analyzed and ensure that they're in the proper places. We just invested again in the canal crossing at Dane City for the back feed, or the backup feed, which we lost during that last loss of supply from Hydro 1. And we've just repaired all of that cable, and that's all back in play now. What else can I tell you? On an annual basis, we're doing visual, we're doing pole testing, we're doing critical switch maintenance annually. We're spending over $150,000 a year on vegetation management, and we're not keeping up with the vegetation management. With the climate change the way it has been, what we're finding or experiencing is that growth cycles are now starting to get the trees seem to be growing back a lot quicker. I don't know if the city's noticed that or not, but we're getting quicker grow back in the areas where we're cutting back. Because again, if we start to go back farther than the customers expect, or that they want to lose their trees, then we get grief about that as well. So those are the areas again where we stand. This is what we've been told by Hydro 1. They have said to us that they are in the process right now of reviewing and reinstatement of that second transmission line. So you have to consider for a second that there was 2 at one time, and 1 we were sort of on our own with up here. The other one has JBL on it, had Vail on it, and there's 1 more customer that is in Welland that is part of that C2P line. So if they experience issue, we experience issue. We're not satisfied with that, so we've asked Hydro 1 to go back, come up with a plan, see what we can do to get that second transmission line back up in Port Colborne. Right now, they've given us a ballpark number of about $3 million to get that, just to reinstate the line, and that doesn't talk to the infrastructure in terms of new towers, because they do share towers, those 2 lines, but they said that would be in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million. So we're looking at every opportunity we can to get better redundancy with respect to the line, and again, with Crowland as well. I'm going to let John sort of take over with. Yeah. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'm not giving the Hydro 1 the credit I guess they deserve. They told us that they had slated Port Colborne TS's new build, system renew of the Port Colborne TS for 2025. I think they've moved that up to 2023 in the statement that they made to us when they were in to see us. And I'm going to let John talk to you about the communication enhancements that we're proposing to you tonight, or we're going to show you.
Good evening, Mayor Maloney, council, senior staff, and residents. My mandate is, as manager of customer engagement, is to improve how we communicate with the consumers, the residents of the folks in our service territory. And one thing that we've heard from, and it's primarily from online feedback, but and it gets pretty colorful at times, but some of the things we've heard from the folks online is that they're dissatisfied, not only from the quality of the service, but the fact that we're not giving them enough information in terms of what's going on at any point in time, what's happening during an outage, one that's more significant, or if there's a number of outages in a short period of time, so the frequency. And we've been doing some listening with that, and I've been following along with a lot of the events as they've taken place. And as I'm also within the service territory, so I've got skin in the game to know that my power is affected equally. So it's important that I kind of follow along as much as possible. And some of the areas of focus that we're going to put more effort into are basically our method of our communication channels, the content, and the frequency, both during and after an event. Our on-call service, Power Assist, does provide tweets, and we will jump in and do some Facebook updates, but to a great extent, from my perspective, it's not enough. It's not, it doesn't provide enough frequency, or it doesn't provide enough content in terms of what we need to give the folks of Port Colborne. So those 3 areas, the channels, the content, and the frequency, but also the, just with a bit bouncing around there. Within the channels, the social media based things that we have set up right now, Facebook, Twitter, you know, we can be a lot more dynamic with the updates that we provide, both during and afterwards. I think we do like a short post-mortem, if you will, to basically give the folks an understanding of what happened, the who, what, where, when, why, a little bit of a forensics as to what happened, and people appreciate that. They may not like the fact that their power was out, but they at least appreciate having that information so they can say, okay, I get it. And it would tie into some of the other communication strategies that we're using, updates on our website for planned outages, so people know if something is planned and expected that they can accommodate, I guess, if you will, to the extent that they have the means to do so. Council and community sessions like this one here, we can provide more frequent updates as needed, and as well surveys. We want to start using a little bit more of the online strategies to get feedback from the consumers to say what's working, what isn't working. From a content perspective, we'll talk about projects. Don alluded to a number of things. I'm going to be working with the operations group more effectively to get an understanding of upcoming projects, completed ones, and again, the planned outages. So everything that affects the consumer, that's really what they care about. They don't care necessarily about all the technical things. How does it affect their day-to-day life? And then the frequency of what we're going to provide. There'll be events like this where we speak to council. We can speak to quarterly initiatives per our business plan, and we can also talk about the daily or weekly things that happen through our social media. So that's, for the most part, that's how we want to basically build a better framework of communication to the folks, because I know that's been a struggle of the public, and they've just wanted to get a better understanding of what we have kind of in the hopper and forthcoming. With that, I can hand it over to you for questions.
Before we do, could I just finish one last thought? All of the things that I've mentioned to you tonight in terms of what we are planning on doing, this is not a knee-jerk reaction. This was a part of our system planning. Timing isn't good around the outages and the performance that Canadian Niagara Power has been dealing with, you know, the last little while. But again, all of these things were in the plan, and they are coming to fruition. So I just want to make sure that you're aware it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. Yes, sir.
Mr. Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the speakers. I think one of the things that everyone has to understand, especially at CNP, is that at one time, Port Colborne was probably one of the most reliable systems that existed in this area. A lot of times, other communities would go down and we wouldn't. That seems to have reversed itself, and I understand your explanations, but that's why people are so frustrated. And that's the main reason why they're frustrated, because when I received communications after a lot of those outages is, hell, we never had this before. What the hell's going on? Excuse the expression, but that's and there was a lot more colorful language than that, okay? People are frustrated because things are going down. I mean, one of them, it wasn't even a storm. And the whole system went down for 5 hours. Now, the storm supposedly passed somewhere else, and that's what went down. But that never happened before. So it could be because of the second line that doesn't exist now. There could be a lot of reasons why. But I think the citizens need to know that that's going to be fixed. And you're telling me it's going to be fixed? I want a timeline. Is there a timeline in your plan that tells us that a lot of this is going to be fixed? And how quickly will it be fixed?
What I can suggest to you is that everything that I've sort of put on the screen tonight will be, we are already working on. When you say fixed, we're still, you know, we're going to have outages in the city of Port Colborne, right? So when do we start to, or when do we think that we'll start to see, you know, effects of these enhancements? Probably within a year. I mean, at the end of the day, as soon as we get these relays fixed up with Hydro One, our Vipers are going to start performing properly. For me to put a date on it and say, September 9th of next year, I can't do that. I mean, but I would expect that everything that we're talking about right now, we will see the return on that investment in a relatively short period of time, especially once those Vipers start to perform the way they need to. The automation starts to perform.
Mr. Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. By timeline, I didn't want a specific date. That would be ridiculous to ask you for a specific date, okay? But you just said within a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means within a year, we expect improvements. Therefore, the outages that we have been experiencing, or the type of outages we have been experiencing, will decrease.
Well,
you'll never have zero. I already know that.
What I can say is that the outages that are under our control, we most certainly will have a better experience level. Because right now, when I showed you that outage stat on loss of supply, again, we can't control that. So, what I would expect is the system enhancements that we're dealing with right now will show a relatively quick turnaround on return.
Okay, then I would hope that the citizens have heard that, and they will expect that that's going to happen. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you mentioned the number of $1.8 million that you do invest in the maintenance in the system, and I wonder if your company does like calculations, like you invest 1.8, but you actually, should be investing 2.2, or is that kind of how do you decide that it's 1.8 as opposed to?
How our rates, basically how our capital program is established is we would go to the regulator, the Ontario Energy Board. We would come in with a distribution system plan. We would justify that distribution system plan to the Energy Board. They will either agree with our capital investment or they'll say no. So we always go in and ask for as much as we can possibly get to satisfy that plan. But if the regulator says no, then it's no. But in our last rate application, and the previous, we've been able to successfully argue that case.
Okay, and as well, you talk about Hydro One and kind of the difficulties because you're obviously connected, and how well that works or doesn't work has a huge impact on Port Colborne residents. Like, there were times where, I mean, if there's a storm and high winds and all that, I think there's like an expectation that something can happen and trees can come down and ice storms and the like of that. By the same token, I had to kind of wonder if it, like a seagull flying over, passing wind the wrong way was knocking things out, because it didn't seem like there was any particular weather event, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, we're in the dark. And people get frustrated. It's almost become a joke, like on some of the Facebook stuff, as much as you say colorful language, there's also some pretty funny stuff being posted. And I'm glad people still have a sense of humor about it, because, sometimes it really is a pain in the neck. So I wonder what we can do either as a community or as individuals to help pave the way to get Hydro One's attention to maybe that additional line that seems to be very necessary. Like, what can we do to help?
Well, quite honestly, I think that, first of all, the line of communication needs to be there with Hydro One. Them not being here tonight says something to me about, what their customers, our customers, mean to them, but I'm not going to speculate as to why they're not here. We can certainly work together with the council to draft letters. We can say this is what we would like to see, but whether or not we meet the criteria, there is parameters that the OEB and that the transmitters have laid out that will either define the need or not have the need for that second transmission.
Mr. Alley.
Just a couple of quick questions. In the event of a power failure, is there any way that you can notify residents? And I know it's a tough ask, but the repair time seems to be an unknown all the time. Once power goes out, it's the repair time is unknown, and that seems to be a major issue with people. When's power coming
Can
back?
can I just suggest what we are working on right now? I didn't want to put it into the presentation. We had an OMS. We have an OMS system, which an outage management system, which actually will give the end user a pretty good visual as to what we are doing, whether we're attending those calls, the duration or the expected duration of those outage times. We've had some struggles with this piece of equipment, and it hasn't necessarily worked the way we needed it to. I will tell you this, is that we have a group that are meeting this week with all of our locations at Fortis Ontario to either get this thing worked out, or let's shelf it and get a new one and get something better out there for our customers. So yes, there is a way we can do it. We just ask you to bear with us a little time to make sure that the one that we have isn't repairable, so that we can invest in something new in the future.
That would be one thing, yeah, to communicate to people, because once the power goes off, everybody is looking, when's it going to come back? And it's always the communications seem to be time unknown, ETA unknown, and the unknown factor is a big issue with people. If you could work on that, that would be great. The issues which you talked to about, what is the issue with the power outage, that's an issue too, whether or not, it's a tree that's taking a line down that you're gonna have to run a new line, things like that. Just going back to the system reliability graph.
Yeah.
On the equipment side, there was the big spike in 2016, it shows. And you're talking about constant upgrades and improvements to the system. When it shows equipment failure, and basically you're talking, if you throw 2016 out as the outlier, it's kind of consistent. How do you measure reliability with improvements to the system? And is there a way to measure that, and can you communicate that to people so that they know this is what you're working on, this is what you're improving, and this is what the improvements are doing?
Actually, there actually is a scorecard. The OEB has a scorecard, and we can send you all a copy of the link to the scorecard for Canadian Agripower, which will show. However, there's other avenues as well. The Chapter 5 filing requirements that the OEB lays out nowadays, it basically is there's a process that measures the maintenance matrices against the capital investment. Now, the OEB hasn't defined how that sort of is supposed to tie together, but our capital, or our maintenance and programs and maintenance and operating costs should be reflective, and you should see that reduction. It's fair to say that that we will. I should probably have shown you 10 years of those equipment issues and 10 years of history with that. I was more so trying to indicate that yes, even at that level, those are our big three things. But yes, there's no question that we can measure our capital investment against performance with respect to maintenance.
I think that would go a long way to kind of smoothing over some of the rough waters, just to show people, your customers,
for sure,
that you're investing money in the system that they use, that they have to use because there's nowhere else to go, and that going forward it's going to be more reliable, and especially if Hydro One runs that second line in. But also, I think the most important thing is when we were completely out the entire city and we couldn't reroute through Welland. I think that was a major issue because people were kind of waiting for the rerouting to come back to bring at least, if not all, some back.
Well,
and there was nothing.
We actually did reroute. We were waiting. There's always that fine balance between the initial reaction to the outage versus which is our next best approach. Should we wait a little bit in case they can tie these things back, or should we just arbitrarily go over there, start switching around with Welland? Because there is a number of things. See, we don't have an official operating agreement with Welland. There's no guaranteed load at Crowland for us, so we have to sort of massage our way through it. There is one other thing we're doing right now. We are putting an operating agreement in place with Welland and Hydro One with respect to Crowland. And so not guaranteed load, but at least minimizing the impact to Welland. But again, I'll say that sometimes it's more, I don't want to say more simple, but it's a better approach to just wait for a minute or two to see what we can do with the transmission line, because if we do that, then there potentially is a lot more impact to what happens after the fact. It's better to be running at your full capacity on your guaranteed system than it is to try to start rerouting, because there is limitations with respect to those two cables as well. Just, we try to use those as sparingly as possible so that it doesn't, but We're hearing you. We really
But
do hear you.
that's a good piece of information for people to know. That there is a reason that, you know what, you haven't switched over and provided a substandard amount of power as opposed to waiting to bring everybody back on at 100%. So if that gets shared and people understand that it may be a little while longer because of the issues that you're dealing with, that may go a long way to keep people a little more quieter. Yeah.
We'll make sure we put that on our communication blast as well.
Councilor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. I just quickly looked up the scorecard, and I just noticed that the most recent information here is 2016. Do you have anything more current than that?
Yes, I can give you, well, with respect to reliability, I can. The other thing, I can give you reliability and I can give you safety.
Yeah, this is just the customer performance report.
We do have all the numbers available to us that we report to our board anyway, so we can, but they do a little bit of massaging and magic once it gets back to the, because what they try to do is they kind of normalize to the other utilities that don't reside on the shores of Lake Erie, and you know that some of them that are working in the rural application, and there is a little bit of normalization to that scorecard. So I can show you the real numbers. I mean, I have no problem with that.
I would very much like to have that.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
We can show you where we are.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your attendance here tonight. Mr. Bodner, one more question. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters. I'd like to come at this from a business owner's perspective. And Frank's not here tonight, but I'm sure he'd be jumping at this also. For a lot of small businesses, you know, like oftentimes at home it's just kind of an inconvenience, but for small businesses and any business, it involves sending people home, closing your business, you know, not being able to service your customers. And not only that, in our business, we lost a large compressor, refrigeration compressor that costs us a lot of money. And when that goes down, of course, then you got to react because you have cold or frozen product. It's serious stuff. I know you know all that, but on behalf of the business owners, this is a huge deal, huge deal. And one of the things that maybe you could tell me why, I don't mind when the power goes out and then comes back on. It's this chatter, this banging, that's what knocks out the compressors and everything. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't imagine you have control over that, but I sure hope you can say yes and we'll do something.
We have somewhat of a control over that. The systems work on a reclosing cycle. It's basically allowing something to fault, clearing for a second, less than a second, closing back in, you know, a tree brush or something blows a bird. This is what happens. There is vegetation, there is seagulls, yes, there is. I'm not saying that's the brunt of it. I'm saying that does happen. The momentaries are about reclosing. So what it does is, as opposed to opening and locking out, it opens, it closes to see if it attempts to clear that fault. And this is an industry practice. I mean, it's no different anywhere else. But as far as that goes, do we have control over it? No. And a lot of the times, if you look at that first column on the reliability, and it talks to those unknowns, those transient faults that we're experiencing, we have a great vegetation management program. I mean, and that's what's troubling to us a lot of the time. So those unknowns are the real troubles that we're having, and we are working on that. And I think the protection control study that we're performing right now will give us a better understanding of how we can better set and better serve your business community as well.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your attendance here this evening and for your explanations.
Thank you. We'll come up anytime you need us to come up.
Our next delegation is Judith Bronick regarding business license fee at Tallwood Manor. Ms. Bronick, can you come forward? And again, we have roughly 10 minutes for your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thanks again for the opportunity to present to you on a matter that remains difficult for me as the only B&B operator in the city. I'm here because of the excessive fee and financial burden placed on me. The city has established a fee of $367.25 to be charged yearly for an inspection of my B&B. Not only is the fee is excessive, it is significantly different in both amount and in frequency of inspection across Niagara. I've provided you a list with different cities in the region, what they charge B&Bs, and the majority of them have no administration fee. There is a correction though on the Niagara Falls inspection. And the inspection for Niagara Falls B&B is $254.25. Again, all these prices include the HST. Also, too, there is a correction on Niagara on the Lake. The $808 per room is a licensing fee. They are inspected every 4 years by a private fire inspector. The majority of the cities in the region do not charge for, do not do inspections, fire inspections annually for B&Bs. There is Fort Erie. They do a fire inspection every 2 years. Pelham, they do none at all. I won't go through all of them. You can see what it is there. Welland, for instance, they have a one-time fee of $271.20. And again, that's a one-time fee. Thorold, there is a $100 for business application only. Wainfleet, $150 fee, and it's currently under review. Anyhow, that gives you a general idea of the fees. Though St. Catharines, they have no fees for B&Bs, no reinspection. So as you can see, Port Colborne is not only the highest, but most frequent. In other regions similar to the size of Port Colborne, approximately 20,000 in population, I've contacted Lindsay and Fergus, and there are no fees and no inspections for bed and breakfasts. It is important to note that many municipalities also allow for a private fire inspector at a much more reasonable cost. It is also important to note that the City of Port Colborne does allow for private annual fire inspections in the hospitality sector, especially with the restaurants. So why is it different for me? Nobody in my facility cooks. They have no access to any heat source other than a coffee pot and boiling hot water. There is no microwave ovens. They do not use my kitchen. That is a private area. Also, your fee is topped with another fee. Not only do you charge me a fee to inspect, you charge an administration fee on top of the fee, the inspection fee. To me, it's simply trying to squeeze a bit more from a single inspection. Next, will you add an infrastructure renewal fee or something else? In the end, it's just a huge burden and it affects my ability to be profitable. We are Port Colborne. We are not Niagara on the Lake nor Niagara Falls. I am lucky that my business runs from May, luckily, into October. That is it. Finally, we can put this into perspective, please. Do you want to expand the B&B, hospitality, tourism, and number of visitors to the community? Are you ready to be open for business? Are you encouraging expansion in the sector, or are you placing an unnecessary bureaucracy and barriers to growth? I understand the idea of cost recovery for inspections, but why is yours disproportionately high in comparison to other cities and towns? If you want to be open for business, and I was told you were when I first bought that property 15 years ago, please don't place this entire burden on me, the only one left in the marketplace in Port Colborne. I am not here asking for a freebie. I'm here asking to be treated with respect, support, and a reasonable fee in local needs and investments, not roadblocks. And just one last comment. I spoke with the Ontario Fire Marshal, Dale Moore, and he was quite surprised. His first question to me was, were you asking for the fire department to come in and inspect your property? And of course, I'm not. It's a yearly expectation here in Port Colborne. And he was quite surprised to find out that I was being charged for an inspection. So this is all I have to say at this point. I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions. I'd be quite happy to answer them.
Are there any questions of Mr. Barnick? It would appear that there are no questions. Chief Cartwright, do you have any comments?
Your Worship, I'll decline at the moment.
Mr. Barnick, no one has asked any questions. No one has asked that this matter be reviewed, and it would appear that accordingly, no further action will be taken on this matter. Mr. Bonder has a question, finally.
Well, I think there should be a chance, and I would suggest, would it not be at budget time when fees are set, that we could have a discussion on this? Chief, is that when we do our fee schedule?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bodner, the fee schedule was reviewed by Council in March of this year and passed by Council during the course of the budget deliberations. And if I could just make one correction, the fee for a bed and breakfast in the city of Port Colborne is $275, and it was last year as well.
Mr. Mayor, may I answer to that? That price that I quoted you, that, like all the others I have listed here, it includes HST and a $50 administration fee from the fire department.
Okay.
And I would, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor, to Council, I would like to have the option of using a private fire inspector like others. I will be quite honest, I can't continue going on like this. It will be one more business gone.
It's not our practice to allow, I don't know who you call it, individuals to make the inspection. We require our own fire department to make such inspections. That's the policy of this community.
Well, thank you for hearing my concerns, and
Mr. Bond, do you have another question?
No, Elliot.
Mr. Elliott.
I guess it kind of was answered, but Chief, every year you submit a fee schedule, is that correct?
Through your Worship to Councillor Bodner, at the direction of the CAL and the Treasurer, we've put all of the fee schedules together under one bylaw. Right. That happened, I believe, probably March of this year. We combined everything under one bylaw versus each department doing independently of one another. So everything now is captured under one bylaw.
Okay. So I would suggest that we revisit that at that time when that bylaw comes to us, if anybody has. And I think we should let Judith know when she can show up and ask for reconsideration of that at that time. I don't know if we want to get into just jumping around and revisiting.
What you're suggesting, Mr. Bonder, is that fee schedule is what it is now. Next March, when it's budget time again, that we would revisit it.
Yes.
Okay, but the fees as stipulated now will not be changed.
Yeah, I don't think we have a practice of changing fees in midstream. It just, it would get kind of hectic. So, but I agree, we should relook at this and have, a good discussion on it. Thank you.
Mr. Elliott, you had a question?
Yep, just two quick questions, one for Judith. You say you don't want the fire department to do the inspection, but to have somebody else. And yet, say for Niagara-on-the-Lake, all the other cities have the fire department do the inspection.
Correct.
Right?
Niagara-on-the-Lake,
Is
Mr.
the only
Mayor,
one.
to Mr. Elliott.
So, but
Niagara-on-the-Lake does an inspection once every 4 years. There was a correction on that.
Okay.
And it's done by the bylaw officer.
Right.
He is given, by the Ontario Fire Marshal, he's considered a designate and can do the inspections.
and all of the other municipalities, the fire department does the inspection.
Correct, but the thing is, not for B&Bs. Some of them, there's only a few that do it for bed and breakfasts. No, the majority of municipalities do not inspect yearly for bed and breakfasts around the region.
Okay. Second question I have is for the chief. Just quickly tell us again why we do an annual inspection as opposed to everybody else.
Yes, Mr. Louis.
Sorry, through your worship, if it's okay with Councillor Elliott, I'll try to contribute with an answer, and maybe we can still call on the fire chief. The delegate said something that I'd like to hijack a little bit. She said, let's put things in perspective, and I think I maybe can help both parties here by putting things in perspective a little bit. I want to take this back. I don't think it's appropriate for staff to sort of
That's fine.
have a debate with the delegate, but we're operating in an environment that staff are coming in every day, and we want the public to be happy, we want council to be happy. We're just operating in the environment that has already been established. The number one requirement is a business license, and the city licenses only a certain type of businesses. Food trucks, garages, lodging. Lodging is one of them, kennels and so on. There's only 4 or 5 different classes. This is one area that council has decided in the past, for whatever reason, good or not so good, that they want to see business licenses issued. Might have been a past council, and that's okay too. One of the requirements of the license is a fire inspection. So it's not a fire department requirement, it's a council requirement of the license that annually a fire inspection be done. I don't know if it's once every 4 years in Niagara-on-the-Lake or twice a year in Timbuktu. There must have been a reason behind that decision at the time, and if council wants to revisit that, fire chief and I will operate with the new rule when it's made. The third component is the fee for the inspection, and maybe we should do it differently. You know, if a person operates without a license, they're not in compliance of our licensing bylaw, and I guess, you know, the city should take action. Maybe we should collect all the fees as an application fee for the license rather than a fee for the service. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a better way of doing it. I don't know if the fee is justified or not, and when I say that, a perfect system of fees would recapture the cost of delivering the service. I mean, I think council can concede that there's a cost to the fire inspector going out there, there's a cost to training the fire inspector, there's a cost to the paper that he prints his reports on. I don't know if that cost is more than, equal to, or less than the cost the fee that we're charging. And I don't know if Niagara-on-the-Lake or Grimsby's charging the right fee or the wrong fee, but I think we need to decide, I think for the delegate's sake, it's more than coming back to the fee bylaw meeting and deciding if the fee is right. I think it's deciding, does council want to see continue the license? Is a fire department a component of that license, a fire department inspection? Can and should that inspection be done by private companies rather than by a city department? Because that opens another can of worms with liability and everything else. And then I guess we can revisit the fee and see if the fee is the appropriate fee. This has been done 2 years ago or less. We revisited the fee and it was significantly reduced. But even that reduction I don't think had any basis in reality in terms of comparison to the actual cost of providing the service. And I think that might be one of the fundamental inputs into the amount of the fee is how much does it cost to provide the service. And an administration fee is a part of recovering the cost of providing a service because administration is done in the background when the service is provided. So I'm not sure if that provides more clarity for either council or the delegate, but I think staff needs to know at the end of today's meeting, are we still operating with the same rules that council has had in place? And if we are, that's okay. And if we want to change them, that's okay too. Just a little bit of clarity for the fire department and the delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Lowy. Mrs. Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I had just actually wanted to touch on the meeting that we had a couple of years back as well, when Judith first brought this to our attention. And we had some extensive dialogue, and we did a lot of, we looked at all of the rules and regulations and the whole fee structure, the reason for the inspections. We looked at who should be doing the inspections, and the chief could let you know he was put to task for bringing forth quite a bit of information for all of us. And we did an extensive review at that time, and at that time we did significantly lower the fee with no real cause, because the original fee did reflect the cost. And it was a cost recovery situation, but we did, for whatever reason, we did lower the fee considerably. And that was then, and here we are back again asking for yet lower fees. And revisiting this yet again, and I'm just wondering how many times is this council going to visit this issue? I thought it had been decided, and that was it. Certainly at budget time, you can talk about issues around fees, but as to the need for the inspection and who does the inspection, I would think that that decision's been made, and the fee for now has been made. That's just my feeling on it.
Any other comments or questions, Mr. Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. One of my major concerns the last time this was brought up, and one of my major concerns now, is the fact that at budget time, we pass these fees. No one says a word, and we've passed them, and they're done. Until all of a sudden someone shows up, and she isn't the only one, she isn't the only one that has come here requesting a decrease in fees over other fees. If we give staff their marching orders, and that's what that is, essentially, how can we turn around after and say, oh no, hold on a minute, let's change this, hold on a minute. We can't do that. What is there is what is happening now. If it needs to be revisited next March, fine. Whoever is going to be here can do it in March next year. But at this time, we pass those fees. And it is, I believe, I cannot and I will not support anything that changes those fees at this time. We're cherry picking now. We either put it all together in a package like we did, or we cherry pick. And I don't think we should be cherry picking.
Mrs. Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have to kind of think that this boils down to, do we think B&B type places should be inspected yearly? Should they have a license? And if the answer to that is, yes, we do, and so far that's what we've done. We have had that expectation for not just Judith, but any of them that would exist, that would be part of what they must do. And I base it on a safety aspect. I mean, why else does the fire department go in and inspect? Why do they inspect anything? It's to make sure that it's safe for the people that stay there, for whatever businesses that get inspected. It's about safety. So I think that we're going to have to wait till next March. If there's an opportunity then if there's obviously could be lots of new councillors sitting around this table, they can change the course if they wish. But I think that we made that decision in March, and we're there now. So that would be my suggestion, that we not cherry pick, as Councillor Doucette says, but we stay with the decision, and that's how I feel. Thank you.
So, Unless council is ready to revisit this, bring a motion to revisit this issue at this time, the matter is completed till next March at least.
Mr. Mayor, to the councillors, thank you for hearing me. I'd just like to make one more small point. Again, compared to 2016, when the fee was $175, and again, that's HST and the $50 admin fee. From that amount to this amount this year, we are looking at a 193% increase in fees. And I'm sure like you've never, none of your utilities go up that high, nor do your mortgage interest rates go that high. I get the whole idea of wanting it safe for people. Again, I've been compliant, and I always have been from 2004. And I must admit, I can certainly understand the challenge of reversing a fee that's already been set and discussed in March. I'm disappointed that it wasn't brought to my attention or I didn't hear about it. Perhaps the fault is my own. However, I hope I'll be around next March to hear council discuss it, because at this point I'm really not certain I'm interested any longer.
Thank you, Mr. Brown,
Thank
for your comments.
Mayor and Council.
Moving on the agenda, the mayor's report is next. I have a number of items to report on. I'll start with the successful Canal Days media conference, where the summer events were reviewed, and most especially Canal Days activities. And I think it was a well-attended and good event. United Way campaign celebration was held, and the city of Port Colborne's, under the direction of Millie Orlowski and Mike Mazzatelli, were acknowledged for their increased participation. And those parties are actively pursuing United Way campaign for 2018-19. Plaques have been presented to McKay, St. Teresa's, and École Saint-Joseph and Port Colborne High School regarding the 150th anniversary maple planting from the offspring of the comfort maple. It's a tree in Fenwick that they're not quite sure how old it is, but the guesstimate is based on 500 years plus. We had a kids fishing derby organized by the Port Colborne Conservation Club. It was hosted on Father's Day, and there were many participants there, young people, beating the water to a froth, and some of them arriving at 7 in the morning. The Niagara Regional Government, Niagara Regional, hosted a seminar regarding their proposed strategic plan. Mr. Barrick and myself attended as politicians. This Thursday evening, Port Colborne High School in Lakeshore will have their graduation ceremonies, and members of council will be there to present the acknowledgements from the city. Canada Day is this weekend, and moving forward, on Saturday there will be the opening of the Antique Power Show at 12 p.m. and people are encouraged to go. It's really amazing what these individuals do as a hobby. Sunday is the actual Canada Day celebrations, which will be commencing at noon, and activities will carry on throughout the day, and in the evening there'll be a fireworks display. There's one more comment. The annual Lions Carnival will start next week. The Lions contribute to our community in so many ways, and this is their big fundraiser, and actually culminates with the drawing of a motor vehicle. That's my report for this day. Mr. Barrick was there. So there you are, ready for me, Mr. Barrick. I was ready to count you missing in action because you weren't sitting in your chair.
I started to slowly make my way over here. ready for you when you're ready to acknowledge me. So thank you so much.
I'm ready to acknowledge you.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. I want to take the opportunity to thank, although he's not here now, Mr. Hayworth, who was here giving a presentation earlier this evening with respect to the region's new official plan. So happy that he was here as the region's subject matter expert to deliver that information to this council. Recently, though, Regional Council did endorse the 2018 Niagara Region Transit Service Agreement. The report that we approved outlined the details of the service agreement between the Niagara Region, City of St. Catharines, City of Welland, and City of Niagara Falls as their transit providers. And it's been a very collaborative, unified, and detailed consultation with all four parties. As a reminder, in 2010, the region entered into a pilot project agreement with those partners to facilitate an intermunicipal transit program. Last year, the Niagara region obtained jurisdiction to operate conventional intermunicipal transit services on a non-exclusive basis through a triple majority process, which you, as this council, would have seen, and if I recall correctly, would have endorsed. In January 2018, all four parties signed a memorandum of understanding to work collaboratively through governance discussions outlined in the Niagara Transit Service Delivery and Governance Strategy. The 2018 Niagara Region Transit Service Agreement that we just approved ensures that the intermunicipal transit service continues while we have those future governance discussions. So the service agreement that we approved extends the service by 3 years with an option to renew 2 additional years. And my hope is certainly through the next term that those governance issues continue and get resolved so we can provide the excellent service to all of our residents. On another note, but important one as well, the Niagara region recently ratified a 4-year collective agreement with CUPE, Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 1287. That agreement is in effect January 1st this year to December 31st, 2021. This freely negotiated agreement covers 874 full-time, part-time, and casual employees working in most regional departments. These include technical, skilled labor, professional employees located throughout most of the Niagara region's facilities. So we're pleased to announce that we have had an equitable agreement been reached. So thank you to the region staff and CUPE negotiating teams for their hard work getting through that agreement. Also recently, the Niagara region had a 2019 budget guidance committee meeting. So that's the only budget meeting for this year. Due to the election, usually we have our budget finalized in the December, but this year we're only setting guidance, and in this case it's 2%. Staff will continue their work, and they will bring those reports back for the 2019 budget in the January 2019. So we'll see how that flows and maybe staggers with then this local council's budgets. I know local municipalities like to have the regional rates done and some guidance there for when they do theirs. And finally, we recently celebrated 10 years of the Niagara Prosperity Initiative. After 10 years, nearly $15 million have been invested in our community in Niagara. The NPI, or the Niagara Prosperity Initiative, is celebrating the impact of that the initiative has had on Niagara through the past decade and looking forward to how poverty will continue to be addressed. This year alone, the Prosperity Initiative is funding 23 projects from 17 agencies across Niagara, serving 10,000 people and creating nearly 200 jobs. And I know Port Colborne has, on an annual basis, been in receipt of many of those funds, not the city, the corporation itself, but the agencies within Port Colborne, such as Port Cares, Community Living, and others, et cetera. So that's my report this evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to take any questions, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Barrick. Questions of Mr. Barrick? It appears there is none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your attendance. Next is councilors' items. Do we have any issues or inquiries that councilors wish to make at this time? Yes, Mr. Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, through you to Mr. Ecolina. Last week, I sent an email out to bylaw At 99 Bell, there have been dirty diapers, a lot of them, all over the boulevard and in the back of the building. They're still there. I had requested that the region be told about it. I had requested that, and I would tend to believe that the bylaw people did that, but there has been no action. I went by again today. Today was garbage day. The diapers are still along around that pole in the boulevard, all over the place, and animals are getting into it, and you name it, it's happening. And it's been going on for about a week. I don't know how quickly we can do something about it, but I would like to have something done yesterday, if that was possible. You're talking health issues, you're talking a lot of different possibilities here. So Dan, can you enlighten me on this in some way, or are you even aware of it? Because I came in and spoke to the bylaw people. On top of sending an email, 2 days later I came in because it hadn't gotten done. So,
through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Doucette, no, I'm not aware of it, but I will definitely get in touch with bylaw staff, and I will send you an email tomorrow on the status of it.
Okay, because something's got to be done. I mean, it's been a week, over a week, and there's a school right around the corner. Let's be honest here. That was number one. That was the easy one. Number two, this is for the citizens of Ward 2 and my colleagues here. I will not be running for re-election. I've reached a point where there are things like this. That's an example, but there are many other things like this. The fact of waiting almost a year to a year and a half for something that took a long time. I'm at the point where I get angry and I'm frustrated. And if I'm angry and frustrated, I don't believe I'm serving anyone by doing this. So I've decided to leave. I mean, I've been at it for 21 years. It's time for me to leave and time for someone else to try to maybe to get some of these things done faster. I don't know what the answer is. But the frustration has reached a point where I don't believe I can be effective any further. So I am presently not going to be running. I will be here till the end of November. The only thing I request of the citizens is that they make sure that whoever they pick as the next city councillor to replace me is someone that is willing to work with other people and willing to be open. Promising that you're going to do a lot of things and not knowing the process is extremely dangerous. And in the past, we've had people that have promised, I'm going to go do this and it's going to happen right away. Guess what? That's not the way the system works. Learn the system, and if you vote someone in, make sure that you vote someone that knows the system and is capable of running with the system to get things done. Okay? You're not a goat with your head down and banging heads. You've got to work with the people. I'm at the point where I'm having difficulty working with the people, and that's why I'm leaving. I don't think it's fair to anyone for me for that to happen. So it's been great. It's been an honor. I've enjoyed myself. And I've made a lot of friends I would not have made it otherwise. There's a lot of people out there that are friends now that I met during the process and over the years that I will not miss. I'll be around. I'm not leaving Port Colborne. I'm just not going to be here. So if you ever want to chat, come on over. I'm not far. I'm just on McRae. So let's continue to work hard till November, and then at that point someone else will take over on my case, and hopefully it'll be someone that is willing to work with everyone and cooperative. That's the main thing. Okay? Anyway, that was difficult, but.
Thank you, Mr.
Take it
Doucette,
easy.
for your 21 years of service to this community. Your blunt, friendly attitude will be missed around this table, and thank you very much again for those years of service. I just think, what can I say? You will be missed. Mr. Lee, with the problem of the diapers on Bell Street, would it not be possible to have one of the vehicles we have, trucks that go by there with gloved hands and pick this refuse up and take it for proper disposal?
To you, Mr. Mayor, if the debris is on the road allowance, then we can deal with that at that time. We will have, I'll have some staff look at that. We'll talk with Myla and see what the situation exactly is. It would appear to be much deeper than just the front of the building. That being said, between the two departments, we'll see what we can accomplish.
Okay. And will you let me know what the results of your inspection are?
Certainly.
Thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead, Councillor.
I have a couple things here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this question through you is for Chris, and it comes from Heather McDougall and Ron Barda from Pleasant Beach. Would like to know about the roof on the enclosure that hasn't been changed, and a couple months, I'm just reading here, a couple months have come and gone since we were told it would be done, and is there a time frame for this change?
Mr. Lee.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Butters. What we have, the roof that's in place, as per numerous discussions, is actually the roof that is intended to be for the next little while.
Okay, so it's the...
What it is that there's a great system in there to keep the, for lack of a better term, the critters out of the garbage disposal. From feedback that I'm getting from the region of Niagara so far, it's working well. They don't have any issues.
Okay.
We have some debris that's being deposited on the outside, but city staff is dealing with that.
Okay, thank you. And then through you, Mr. Mayor, I think to Dan, with the long weekend coming, will bylaw enforcement be coming out there more than once a day or in the evenings? There should be no reason for residents to have to call to keep this road end accessible for everyone, including emergency vehicles. And obviously she's referring to the problem with parking, and we have a long weekend coming up, and we have experienced some pretty bad conditions out there in terms of, you know, illegal parking. So could you give us some insurances on that, Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Butters, staff is on board to work this weekend. I will talk to staff if they can patrol it more than once a day.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Butters. Any other questions of members of council to staff? Yes, Mr. Bodner.
I'll cross Pleasant Beach off my list. Thanks, Councillor Butters. Centennial Park line painting. I know it's, you know, on the agenda, but we're into a holiday weekend. It still hasn't been done. And line painting, this is to Chris, I'm sure. Line painting in the city in general, are we doing it twice a year? And where are we at? Is it half done? Can you give me an idea?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Butters. The center line painting is twice annually, as you had indicated. The first round has been completed. What remains now is the crosswalks and some of the stop bars. And due to some staff shortages right now, we're working through that process, but that's intended to be completed by operations staff. So that would include your crosswalk to Centennial Park that we had referenced previously.
Okay. At the end of Empire Road and Highway 3, 2 weeks ago now, or 3 weeks ago, I brought up that the stone from the shoulder is moving on to the roadway. I seen the city sweeper out there, I believe, a number of times cleaning that up. It is right now able to be shoveled with a shovel off of there. This is a dangerous situation, and I'm going to tell you right now that if there's, and I fear for either cyclists, we have a lot of cyclists in groups that travel, and these guys are doing a pretty good speed. If they ever come around that corner and hit that stone, or a motorcycle, I'd be more than happy to be a witness on their behalf, because whoever's responsible for this is doing a crap job at fixing that. So can you enlighten me, Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bodner. Yes, actually, we had this discussion earlier. That being said, city's operations staff have contacted the MTO on numerous occasions because they are MTO-controlled intersections. As you had indicated, we have swept the streets that we have jurisdiction over to try to take care of our portion, but we will definitely communicate that again to the MTO. Okay. Seems to be a weekly conversation that we're having.
Sure, but this is serious, serious stuff. That stone on there today is more than an inch thick. I could feel my truck, and I'm doing, not speeding, I'm going around that corner, but if you were to just step a little bit on the gas, you could feel it roll on those stones. They've got to do something about this. This is not just aesthetics. This is serious stuff. So I appreciate it if you can more than do something on that one. One more. Lakeshore Road East. We had a situation there where we repaired a culvert. And in repairing that culvert, I guess we underestimated how much water was laying on the south side of that road, and it came across in a torrent and really worried the owner of a property that we put the water on. And this is not a municipal ditch that we put the water into. It is simply on their property, and I think staff thought that the swale that was there, which is a private swale, was in better shape than it was. And it, just to give you perspective, this person's lived there for 17 years. Their sump pumps never ran. We put the water in a big gush. 7 days, 24 hours a day, that sump pump ran. There's a finished basement. It's a substantial home. Anyways, at the time, I met on site with one of our people from Henry's department. We had a very good meeting there. The resident is super concerned that because we've opened this up, that there could be flooding again on that property. And one of the things that when we stood there for an hour or so, kicking around ideas, I had asked, can our staff take a look at the swale situation there? It's a little more complicated than a swale, and it does go into a municipal drain. But I wondered whether our staff could be directed to go on private land and assess the situation for, among other things, beaver dams. And if you don't think we have beavers, we do. And they're costly. I think we had to spank about 16 of them last year. They can really gum things up. But our staff knows what they're looking for. They could spot something like that and maybe give direction to the people that own this particular area as to how we can make that work. I sent an email to the CAO. Also on that, I have heard nothing. And that's not acceptable. I think we need to have some resolution for this resident and take the worry. One of the suggestions also was maybe partially blocking that drain coming across so that it can gather water and let it out slowly. Because really why we did it was flooding a tennis court on somebody's property. So anyways, Mr. Lee, can you give me an idea? I've spouted on all about this, but I really wonder if we could put our staff on private land, how that would work, and if council could direct that to happen. Thank you.
Mr. Lee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. What I would recommend is that council direct staff to get permission to enter those private lands and then have a look at what we can determine to be the case. That being said, as you are clearly indicating, we'll be working on private lands. We really don't have a jurisdiction to be there, but if we ask for permission, that should be clear. That being said, we can come back with possible recommendations to the landowners as to what the problem may or may not be, and a fix that they would then have to implement. Essentially, that's where staff would be, our responsibilities, I think, would end. I don't think council would want us to direct us to do any works on private lands in any way, shape, or form. But if you want staff to do that, we need to be directed by council to go onto those private lands and make a recommendation.
And I think, if I could ask, Mr. Mayor, that we, however we're going to do it, direct staff to do that, to go there and just take a look and see, in their opinion, if there is an actual blockage or if it's just a case of maintenance not being done. But I think we have the expertise to do that, and the average person would not be, would not be capable of maybe seeing something that our staff could be. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to see that.
If you would like to make the motion, directing staff to enter on private lands to assess the situation.
Sure, I would be very happy to do that.
Motion moved and seconded.
It's Lakeshore Road.
Questions there, Mr.
On the
Elliott?
corner.
We have a motion duly moved and seconded. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions of council to members of staff? Mrs. Demery, you have your usual list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, it's not a big, long list this time. It's one issue, but it is multifaceted, and it could be a problem. But in any case, it's really about an accident waiting to happen. I'm going to reference the East Village area for this, but seriously, I'm hearing these same stories from all over the city. We have people speeding out of control, paying no attention at all to the traffic rules, to the signs, to anything. We have cyclists who are not riding their bikes properly. We have lots of motorized cyclists that are all over the place as well, doing exactly the wrong things. We have golf carts riding the streets. Things are getting out of control. They really are getting out of control. I actually saw somebody towing a child in a shopping cart the other day. It was a food basics cart hooked up to a car. That's insane, but it's happening. So my question is, where are the police? They're the ones that need to be dealing with this issue. They need to be here more often dealing with these things. It seems like I'm always asking for them, but the fact is it needs to be dealt with. So signs are not going to take care of these problems because people are not paying attention to the signs. They really don't care about the rules of the road, but I do believe that they will care when there's a ticket in their pocket. So I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor, for your office to write a letter or to reach out to the police department and see what can be done about making this community safer. There is an accident coming. Kids are coming out of school very soon. This is going to be a problem. So it's about time people understood that the rules are there for a reason. They need to obey them.
We will write, we'll call the staff sergeant tomorrow and then follow up with a letter. Thank you. There be no further questions. Alderman Doucette, then Alderman Elliott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I missed this one. Through you to Mr. Lee. The East Village was done. Everyone's happy with the fact that everything is running pretty close to, but not completely. There's still some work to be done. I noticed they've been digging in places that we thought were done. But if you go down the streets, starting on Rodney, and you just go at a regular speed, you swear you're in the middle of waves. You're like this, constantly. You're in a boat, waving, going up and down. I understand that the pavement is sort of finished, but is there something that can be done, or will there be something done to straighten these roads out? Literally, it's like having a speed bump every 5 feet. It's unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. And I go down there at least 2 or 3 times a week. So I'd like the citizens to find out what, and an answer I can give them that will satisfy them in some way, shape, or form.
Mr. Lee, member comments.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Doucette. Excuse me. Yes, there is actually, as you had indicated, there are still some, for lack of a better term, gopher holes being created everywhere. As we deal with the deficiencies that are as part of the construction process, which is one of the reasons why we don't do final paving as soon as the work is completed. We want to make certain that those settlements, those deficiencies are adjusted and taken care of. Once that's done, the general rule of thumb that we have is within the next year, we go in, we mill and resurface and do the entire street and make it nice and smooth and simple. That's the intent going forward. We still have, as I said, other deficiencies going on. There'll be some others that I will speak to when I have comments back to council in a couple of minutes, so I can address those then.
Okay. Councilor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Chris. Because Bodner stole my, we painting the rest of the lines. That's usually what I bring up. I'll bring up just one thing we had talked about before, just over here at the corner of Clarence and Catherine, come down the one-way street where the delivery parking is for trucks. There's a couple of signage issues. So I guess that'll bring Dan in with bylaw. We had discussed about painting hash lines to block off so there's no parking. There is a parking stall as soon as you turn the corner, and right in front of the barber shop there's a parking stall, which is actually a parking stall for delivery vans. But people are misunderstanding it because there's a no parking sign that points back towards Clarence Street, so people think it's for cars, and it's not. It's for delivery trucks. We had talked about hashing that out so that people don't park on that corner. Can we still do that? And can we take the no parking sign that points back towards the corner down so people don't get the impression that you can park south of that sign? If you go over and take a look at it, it's very confusing on the signage that's posted. And it just looks like it allows you to park a car in that one spot. And I know there's been issues with cars being there and the trucks trying to get in to make deliveries into that block. So if we could do everything we can to make it so that cars don't park there, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Elliott, we can definitely do the hash marks as you referred to. That being said, I will touch base with bylaw to make certain we don't have to do any changes to the actual bylaw itself to alter the signage. So that being said, if it does need a modification, then we'll have to come back to council for that to make it legal. But
just have a look at all the signage. It's really confusing. That's all. Thank you.
At this point, can we have staff response to previous councilor inquiries? Go, Chris.
Through you to Mr. Mayor and the rest of council. Just as a follow-up, I know that the water rates and the water system have been a hot topic over the last few weeks. That being said, I just wanted to give you a bit of an update on some certain things. As you are all becoming aware of, the nickel job is tending to wind down right now. That being said, as is our standard practice, and as I stated in my previous report from the last council meeting, is that we then go in and target those areas to see if there are any leaks in those areas with all the construction activity that happened. That being said, we found 4 leaks. Those leaks have now been repaired, and this is an ongoing thing. And actually, Mayor Maloney brought it to my attention. He asked a question about it just the other day about what the construction was about again. He thought we were finished. Actually, I said we were fixing repairs that were caused because of the construction. So I just sort of wanted to give you an update on that and let you know that this is an activity that we do on a continual basis. We have 3 leak detection units that our staff use on a constant. Whenever we have staff that's available, we do that. And we actually have targeted programs based on activities that are happening within the municipality. So this isn't a stagnant thing, and this is something that we do on a regular basis.
Any estimate of how much water you detected? How much, the size of the leak? Was it a substantial leak?
Well, excuse me, the leak, they weren't substantial, but they were enough that our leak detection equipment actually located them, and we were able to determine what they were quite quickly. There's actually one other situation where Director Siness had pointed out, because I talked to him about this previously. We actually came across a service lateral that we had found leaking. And in the months leading up to us determining that there was because you have to understand that the meter is on the homeowner's side within the home, and that meter was reading, the last 2 months has averaged about 17 cubic meters per month. We couldn't access that meter, and we were having difficulties getting access to it. That said, we put a meter out at the property line in a pit, and in the first month of reading, the reading on that particular service jumped to over 1,300 cubic meters. So we had over 1,200 cubic meters that were being lost just on one service lateral to one home. So this is just an indication of some of the things we're starting to target now moving forward that we didn't have any evidence of, it hadn't surfaced, and we're hoping to target more of these as time goes on. If you were to use those numbers, if we were to have, say, 25 homes out of the 6,000 that the city has that have those types of leaks, we would have a decrease of probably in excess of 300,000 to 400,000 cubic meters annually. So this is the type of thing that we're starting to target now, and we will be doing into the future.
It's good work. Please keep it up. Thank you. Chief Cartwright.
Your Worship, thank you. A couple of things. I'm glad the regional councillor is still here. I'll be able to bring it to his attention as well. The first thing is we're continuing with the smoke alarm program throughout the city on Tuesday nights and during the week. We have a quota, dare I say that, on our crews to make sure they get out and get the job done during day and night. Something that's really coming to become an issue for us. My fire prevention officer, Scott Lawson, asked me to bring it forward to council. We are being inundated with hoarding issues in the city. It's to the point where, quite frankly, the fire department's being asked to look after things by agencies that should be looking after some of these issues. It's to the point where the reality of this is, in a single family home, we have the authority to go in and deal with smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms. If there's electrical issues, we can, or if there's wood stoves or heating issues in the home. But our hands are pretty much tied unless we can convince people to work with us, which we've been relatively successful to, only in the sense that our crews are helping people move stuff out, relocate things so they got pathways to exits, making sure their stoves and counters are clean. This is happening on a daily basis. We're getting at least one every week right now in the city. Coast, which is an agency that was in place to deal with this, are now referring people to us. Additionally, the Hoarding Coalition in the region of Niagara, of which, quite frankly, Mike Bandia was one of the first ones to get that organized and assisted with. Their hands are becoming totally tied and can't do a lot with anything. We had an instance last Thursday, I believe it was, that Scott actually had a local agency assist us with the help of public health. And forgive me for saying this, Councillor Barrick, but the public health staff person came, handed the lady a brochure, and then left. That's not what we need help. A very sensitive subject, especially the lack of resources. But the reality of the situation is we can't keep it up. We can't keep up to it. And we need help. And I'm not suggesting for a moment we need more staff. I'm suggesting that we need help from agencies that should be stepping up to the plate to help us with this. I did raise it at last week's Chiefs meeting, regional Chiefs meeting. We're not alone. Other departments are finding the same issues, so it's region-wide, and I'm sure it's province-wide. So I'm not sure that it's a regional issue, whether it's a municipal issue or provincial issue or a federal issue, but somebody needs to address some of these issues because, quite frankly, there's a lot of cases where if we have a fire in a home, we're going to lose people. It's that simple because they're not going to get out. And it's frustrating for myself, it's frustrating for my staff because it's a never-ending issue. It just goes on and on and on. And I just want to say one thing, it's not any one particular area of the city, it's happening throughout the city, whether it be rural areas, the urban area of the city. Myself and Scott have moved pickup trucks loads of stuff. We've taken stuff to the dumps. There's all kinds of things that we've tried to do to help people. We've even gone out and bought bedding for people, beds for people, to give them a place to sleep other than piles of garbage. And it's such a frustrating thing that I guess we're losing patience. We're reluctant to charge people, especially people who have mental issues, because quite frankly, the justice is the peace will laugh you out of the court. And so we don't try to go that route. We're looking for other resources to help us. We have numerous charges against landlords and other people. I'm thinking right now we got 8 to 10 court cases going on, possibly more that I'm aware of, which takes up staff's time, which takes up our resources, which cost us money, because right now, believe it or not, when the regional prosecutor, which is another issue for our regional council member, for the life of me, I don't understand why the city gets billed for the use of a regional prosecutor when the region collects 50% of all fines. That's another issue that I think needs to be addressed. I don't even know who to turn to get that help. It's beyond frustration. We're spending literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And if everybody looked at the recent check list, you'll see there was one number in there, over 8,000 that went to the region and over 9,000 to the city solicitor for other issues that we're dealing with in the courts. So at the end of the day here, it's financially hurting the city. It's taking away our ability to do what we should be doing in the city, and that's helping people with other issues where, quite frankly, I believe there's other agencies that need to step up. And I told Scott I'd be as gentle as I say Scott, not Scott, our CAO, but Scott, my fire prevention officer. I promised him I'd be gentle, but it's to the point now when I think gentleness isn't working. So somebody needs to be held accountable, or somebody needs to be told to get out of their office and do something. I don't know how else to say it. I apologize if I've been disrespectful.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions of Chief Cartwright? Yes, Councillor Butters?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the regional councillor, how can the public health be involved in finding some help that the chief needs?
Councillor Barrett, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, communication is important. Professionalism is important. The fire chief works for the city, the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne. He has regular dialogue with the CAO, presumably who has regular dialogue with you as the mayor, who also happens to be regional councillor. I'm hearing this for the first time. And if that was a description of him taking the edge off, it's a little disappointing. I would expect commentary like that from city councillors, but not a professional. So I'm hearing it for the first time. I'm happy to have a seat with Mayor Maloney, who's also a regional councillor, to help bring this issue forward. I can't answer on behalf of public health. People have rights. I don't know the individual case-by-case situations that the chief is running into. So all I can say at this point is I'll work with the mayor and with perhaps the CAO to get some answers from public health.
Thanks, Mr. Barrick. Chief, perhaps we can have your concerns detailed so that we can approach public health with specific examples, perhaps individuals, dates, times, so we can have something to respond to.
Your Worship, I'll discuss that with Scott Lawson tomorrow morning. He's the one that's heading this up and trying to get something done. And quite frankly, he's not able to get any cooperation.
Well, similar to Mr. Barrick, it's the first I've heard of this situation myself. Councillor Butters and Councillor Demray.
I think that, you know, it's fine to be a sensitive soul But I think the chief is just calling it like he sees it. He's dealing with a situation that is not for the faint of heart, shall we say. And I really appreciate the chief's candor in what he describes to us and what our fire department and our firefighters need. So I don't take too kindly to him being chastised with his delivery, because I think it's important that we understand, sitting around this table, those challenges that our firefighters are facing, and whatever we can do to help through your office or the regional council, that obviously needs to happen, and I know it will. I know it's going to be dealt with now, but don't go kicking the chief around because it's convenient. Not here, anyway. Thank you.
Councillor Butters, I don't think it was intended to kick the chief around, but as Councillor Barry just mentioned, communication is important. We have to know there's a problem. And tonight, we understand there is a problem, so we'll deal with that problem. Councillor Demray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also found those comments made by Councillor Barrick to be really offensive, but that's okay. I was just going to suggest that the Social Determinants of Health Committee will bring the hoarding issue back to the table. We've discussed it before, and you are right, Chief. There's really very little out there to help in the situation. Unfortunately, we're part of the problem. We've been putting a lot onto your department to deal with, and this is a much larger issue than that. So it does need far more attention, and it needs to be brought back up and put some heat under it and get some work done on this. But we'll at least bring it back to that committee again and see if we can't find some solutions there as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Any other inquiries, Mr. Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you and to council, I recall that it was Councillor Elliott asking if we had any bylaw regarding anti-idling, and in fact we do have one that talks about no idling over 5 minutes in duration. So if there's any idling going on, then a complaint to bylaw enforcement should occur.
Mr. Elliott, you have
That's good to know. Thank you. Because I know that there was an issue with a truck east side. So if anybody has an issue with it, they can call bylaw. Let them know. Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Okay, at this point, we'll move on to consideration.
Wait, one more.
Oh, Mr. Lee.
Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council, in my haste, I'd forgotten one other item that I wanted to bring to the table. That being said, is that we were trying to do the crosswalk at the Market Square across Clarence Street and have it completed before Canal Days. The supplier of the hardware and equipment that's required cannot guarantee that it will be here before such time that we can complete it. So we are aiming for shortly thereafter. He's been instructed to hang on to that equipment if it does arrive the day before, but we didn't want to open the area up to construction and have it not completed before such time.
Thank you. Now we will move on to consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Item number 3, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Corporate Services Finance Division Report number 2018-88, subject grant funding. Corporate Services Department Finance Division Report 2018-88 with respect to grant funding be received for information.
Is there a seconder for the recommendation? Councilor Bodnar? Discussion? Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I had asked for this report a while ago, so it's nice to see it here, and I will bring it forward. If Peter wants to make comment, I'm just happy to see all the numbers that we have displayed on monies that we have received. I'm kind of disappointed in some of the funds that were available that we didn't get money from, especially infrastructure, but I know that there's always intangibles attached to them that we might not qualify for, and we can't get every dime that we're looking for. So if Peter wants to just make comment about the report, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Sinnes?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Elliott, and the rest of the council. So basically what we did was looked at you know, what our process is for grant funding and what we do to apply for such funding. So I did mention in the report that, obviously we don't have any designated staff that does grant writing and nobody professional grant writing on staff, but staff does apply for many grants, and it's left to the departments themselves and the department directors to look at what types of grants are available and then to apply for those grants. And a lot of them come from different organizations that we're associated with, whether it be the Association of Municipalities of Ontario or different organizations that we're members of. So we do look at those, and we look at then the criteria of the grants as to whether or not we have any projects that we have on the go right now that we can apply for. In most cases, if you've already started projects, you can't then apply for the grants. What we do look, one major thing that we've had conversations with the ministries over the years also is just the timing of grant programs. I think that's been a biggest struggle of what we've run into, in that when the grant programs do come out, they come out later in the year. It's past the time that we've passed our budgets and looked at the different types of projects that we may have on the go, and the grant application deadlines. They're a lot of times very narrow. You have maybe a month to put together. They're getting a little bit better, but that was in the past. Also, a lot of times they require matching funds, which becomes a problem if we haven't budgeted for projects and we're looking for projects to do, and then we have to come back to council and say we need X number of dollars to match the funds. And in most cases, if it's large projects, then we're looking at debenturing projects that we haven't really embarked upon in budget process. So those are some of the challenges that we have in going forward with a lot of the grants and the criteria. What we have done, to be on the positive side, is we have recently become members of a group called Public Sector Digest, and there's the services that they provide. So they do provide grant writing services, and they have written one grant for us for asset management for $50,000, and I've just received semi-approval from the organization of the $50,000. It's going through a peer review right now, so we're hopeful that we'll get that. And we're also dealing with them on working on a climate control or staffing grant to get a staff person that would look at all of our facilities and come up with a program for gas emissions and so on and so forth. So there's that one, and we're also working with them to look at our downtown CIP and look at what grants are available so that we can apply to for the downtown CIP. What we are finding is that there's no one grant program that will provide full funding for the downtown CIP, which means we're going to have to look at phasing it at some point, whether it's for infrastructure, whether it's for greening, landscaping. There's different components that so they're looking at that and helping us with that. So that's a good thing. The second part of that is that they also have a municipal grant inventory service, and that service is provided to us, and we can go on their website and look up as many grants that could be in place. The nice thing is that each week that they do send us emails now. If we've registered staff, they'll send us emails saying these grants are available, these are the due dates. So we'll be able to keep up with the grants that are coming down the pipe, and we'll be able to then review them, staff can review them and determine whether or not we meet any of the criteria for those grants. So I think that's the positive side of things. The one thing that Councillor Elliott mentioned was, what have we done in the last 4 or 5 years? So in the report, as you'll see, we received through federal, provincial, and other types of agencies over the last 4 years, we received $12.6 million in grant funding, which I think is pretty good. That doesn't include the OMPF funds, which is the provincial funding, which was over the last 4 years is $11 million. So we do receive a lot of money through the provincial, federal governments. As far as a lot of the federal funding goes, all of the federal programs that were highlighted, we have received dollars for those, and that's the wastewater fund, the public transit, gas tax, Canada 150, Celebrate Canada. So all of those programs that were available to us, we have received funds. And those funds come in different ways. They come from either they're provided to us with the actual dollars that we would receive as a municipality, or we have to actually apply for particular dollars, and we've done that. So those are the sort of the highlights. There's a listing obviously in the report of all of the types of grants that we've received and how much we've received, and we will continue to move forward on any new grant applications and pushing forward with our service provider to ensure that we can apply for those grants, and especially the downtown CIP being the #1 priority of this council at this point in time.
Thank you. Any questions on Mr. Sinnes?
Can I just follow up?
Go ahead.
Yep. It's nice to see that that we've involved Public Service Digest, Public Sector Digest to help us out. Is there a cost to have them look after things for us?
Through Mr. Mayor, there is an annual membership fee, and that provides us with their services. We have access to their websites, their grants inventory, their research components. We receive also one grant writing application free of charge as part of our membership. Anything after that, we do pay per day as to the grant writing, which usually takes about 2 days to provide the service of actually putting together the grant, sending us the draft, we review it, and make any changes that need be, and that's a cost of that we pay.
Okay. I'm really disappointed with regards to the CIP, and that they're under the impression that we'll have to piecemeal it together to get funding for it, which only means one thing to me, and means the cost is going to get driven up because you're going to do it piecemeal instead of trying to get somebody to come in and do it all at once. Is there a limit to the number of funds, let's say, that you will receive your application and be rewarded with the application over a number of years? I mean, if we're going to split this, if you split the CIP up into 4 sections and you keep reapplying 4 different times, are you apt to get the grants 4 times, or do they limit the amount that you can get? That would be an issue, because I mean that's really going to drive the price and almost make it unaffordable.
Mr. Sinnes, have a comment.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. What Director Lee and myself and our CAO have looked at is the different types of grants that may be available, and we're looking at also not only the grants that are components, but we're also looking at our other types of grants that we do receive. So we receive OCIF funding, and there's an application of $1.2 million right now that we can apply for. We receive, that's the grant application under the OCIF. We also receive, next year we'll be receiving over $400,000 in formula funding, which means they give you the number that you get, which is about $400,000. Federal gas tax money also. We're looking at maybe drawing in on the federal gas tax money, the $500,000. So if we can layer some of these grants that we already know that we're getting, plus apply for additional grants, we may be able to do bigger and better things within the downtown CIP, and speed up that process, hopefully. In the meantime, looking at, we're hopeful that there may be some grant programs that come down that are more of the encompassing, all-inclusive, and it's not so restrictive, so that we can apply for more than one property. It depends on whether or not the grants require matching funds. So we also have our reserve, the $6 million that we have sitting in the reserve, and which council has established that we want to use those funds as matching funds so that we get bigger bang for our buck. And so we will be able to use some of those funds as we're getting these grants, and we could have $3, $4, $5 million where we can do a larger section. So that's something that we're looking at right now.
You did make comment to a lot of these funds put out the time frame after budget's completed. Is there anything we could do in our power, change maybe the timing of budget to coincide with when grant applications are being accepted? I know mid-years is probably not going to work, but if some of these grants come out October, November, instead of us doing budgeting in January, February, March, can you push the budget process back into the preceding year so that you're doing budget in October, November for the year to come instead of doing it after the year has already started? Would that make any difference in trying to apply for some grants?
Through Mr. Mayor, potentially. What we found is a lot of the grants, they're sporadic. We don't know when they're actually coming out. Usually the OCIF funding, I think this one is due the end of August, I believe. And then that's the application that they're working on now. But we already know what we're looking at applying for, and we know how much money we have, that if we get $1.2 million there, we know we have $400,000 from the other fund, and we know we have some matching funds to put into that, then all those dollars together, we can determine, okay, what sections can be done. Moving the budget forward, obviously this year will be difficult to do that with the election. That's going to sort of push it ahead rather than back. But I would hope that in the future, once we know that we have all of our financial system up and running, our new budget software up and running, that we should be able to start getting into budget processes in late November type of thing.
Just a final comment, Mr. Mayor, through to staff in general. I mean, when you see the list of the monies that we've received, and with OCIF thrown in there, you're looking at $24 million over the last 4 years. And basically it was thrown out there that we're not applying for grants, right? That we don't apply for anything. Where's your application? Well, when the feds are putting such a prescriptive measure on the grants that we don't qualify for it to begin with, and we don't have projects in our hopper that we want to do, it's kind of hard to apply for those monies. But when you take a look over the last 4 years, we've got $12 million, 12 and change. That's not bad. So I just want to say, staff is on the ball, checking it out. It's really nice to see that we've got our membership in Public Sector Digest to help us out. And I know grant writing, we hear from across the board for any grants that we're looking for. And even the Community Services Department will throw it out there when they're looking for money as well, especially for Canal Days and stuff like that. That it's hard because we don't have a staff member that writes grants. So it's nice to see them giving us a hand, and also keeping us informed on what's coming down the pipe. So it kind of gives us a heads up. So just that's the only reason I asked for the report, is just to dispel the rumor that we're not applying for grants. Yes, we are. We're applying for whatever we can with a limited amount of resources at hand to supply the matching grants for these projects. So just wanted to have that report so that people can see that, yes, staff is doing the job and is on top of getting us all the monies that we can. So thank you for the report, Peter.
Thanks for your comments, Mr. Elliott. Any other questions? Being called for question on item number 3. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Move on to item number 13. Councilor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Region of Niagara taxpayer affordability guidelines.
Seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Elliott? Okay. Comment?
Okay.
Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, on item 2 on the report, says that the Region of Niagara requests the local area municipalities to develop a taxpayer affordability guideline should they not already have one in place. So my question is, do we have a taxpayer affordability guideline in place? If yes, what is it and where can the taxpayer find it or have access to it? And if no, let's get one created.
I'm sorry. Mr. Sinnes, you have a comment.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demery. We don't have a written guideline for taxpayer affordability, but what I do is bring back to council prior to budget is a report that goes to council which lays out the process of the coming budget year, and also to get council's approval of what council wants as the inflationary increase. And normally, when I do bring that forward to council, it's the cost of living at the time. So whether it's 2%, 2.5%, 1.5%, bring that forward to council. Council approves that that is the target for the departments to bring forward their operating budget, and that's what then the departments are advised of, and that's what comes into council as the base budget. As you know, we do bring in the base budget in and around cost of living. There are other components that is added to that. For example, our capital levy increase that we do have on an annual basis of 1.5%. Any new debentures that may be applied to that. So we do start with our base budget with the cost of living. So our cost of living has been council's guideline over the last numerous years. And that is the base budget going forward. And then we also look obviously at what the affordability is, what that percentage is overall for the taxpayer, which blends the region, school boards, and the city levy increases to accommodate, so that we bring in, our levy may be increased by 5 or 6%, but the overall tax increase is kept at that 2.5%.
Okay, thank you. So basically then you craft a guideline every year to guide us through the process. But since this report became public, my phone's been ringing off the wall. So I would like to put it forward that we have something put in place that became a more permanent model that we would use all the time.
Through Mr. Mayor, definitely we can put that together and put it in writing.
Thank you. Item number 14. Oh, we have to vote. I'm sorry. We have the recommendation to move to second it. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 13, Mr. Elliott. 14.
Item 14, City of Quinte West Cannabis Grace Period request that the resolution received from the City of Quinte Cannabis Grace Period request be supported. And I pull that for Councillor Doucette's conflict.
Seconder for the recommendation, Councillor Demery. Discussion? Being none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. That will conclude all the items for separate discussion. Are there any notices of motion? There being none, I'd call for adjournment of the meeting. Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Demery. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of Council 15-18 held today, Monday, June 25th, following the Committee of the Whole meeting. Are there any addendum items then, Clerk?
No, there's no addendum this evening.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to confirm the agenda, moved by Councillor Butters, seconded by Councillor Demery. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Any disclosures of interest this evening? Councillor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Item number 14 in council minutes 1518. And it's an indirect pecuniary interest, and the reason for it is it's impersonal in nature.
Thank you. That should be so noted. Adoption of minutes. A special meeting of council 13-18 held on June 11, 2018, and B, regular meeting of council 14-18 held on June 11, 2018. Call for adoption of those minutes in bulk. Moved by Councillor Butters, seconded by Councillor Demray. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. There being none. Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 14 for the conflict.
Thank you. Call for approval of items not requiring separate discussion. Councillor Butters, Councillor Demray, second. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. All those in favor? Yes. It's getting tired, guys. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Approval of items not requiring separate discussion. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion.
Thank you. That would be me. City of Quinte West re-cannabis grace period request that the resolution received from the City of Quinte re-cannabis grace period request be supported.
Seconder for the recommendation. Councillor Butters. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. There are no proclamations this evening. Minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. Madam Clerk, can you read those out?
The minutes of the Port Colborne Transit Advisory Committee meeting of March 28, 2018. Minutes of the Port Colborne Public Library Board meeting of May 8, 2018. And minutes of the Port Colborne Active Transportation Advisory Committee meeting of May 22, 2018.
Thank you. Motion to adopt those minutes. Councillor Butters, Councillor Demray. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any bylaws this evening, Madam Clerk?
Yes, there's 3 bylaws this evening. 6595-50-18, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Dr. Kelly Miracle respecting the maintenance of a family practice in Port Colborne. 6596-51-18, being a bylaw to delegate financial and staffing authority to the Chief Administrative Officer during the lame duck period. And 6597-52-18, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting on June 25th, 2018.
Thank you. Do you have a second or an individual to nominate those bylaws? Mover. Councilor Butters, seconder. Councilor Demray. Discussion? No. All those in favor?
We're all getting tired. Yeah.
Opposed? It's carried.
Frank is in here. Frank is here. We can't wait.
Motion for adjournment, moved by Councilor
I will take that
Elliott, seconded by Councilor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This meeting is adjourned.